speaking to that, like you played baseball too, right? Um, so like, yeah, you're a younger coach when you first jumped into your role, but was there like an immediate kind of connection when they found out like, oh, you're not just, this super sick meathead that's super knowledgeable, but like we'll listen to you because you can also like speak our language and vibe with us at a different level. I don't know if you can speak to that a little
Absolutely.
bit.
Yeah, no doubt. So it certainly helps, with any role, whether that be baseball or any other sport, if you've played it. I'm not saying that's a requirement, but it does give you, I don't want to say the word is an advantage, but it gets you quicker buy-in because you immediately know what it is that those athletes go through, right? Because every fall, you're going to go through the same ebbs and flows throughout the year, especially once you get into the fall. You go into skill work at the Division I level, we get 20-hour weeks, but skill work is 8 hours. And so you can kind of understand the time constraints, what the athletes go through with school, with class schedules, and then obviously what the coaches expect out of it. And so as a baseball player, and then the added benefit of not only having played baseball, but the coaching staff that had hired me on originally when I first got this job, because we have a new staff this year. But the original staff that hired me on in 2022, I played for him in 2016 at the JUCO level. And so there was that big rapport of not only buy-in from the players, but the coaching staff as well, having
Mhm.
that rapport and the relationship built up from 2016 to 2022. When I got the phone call when I was in Colorado at the time, interning, getting that job offer that summer to come to Utah Valley. And so, no, it's absolutely huge, especially if you can get with guys that had played the same position as you or went through the same routes and journeys.
Mhm.
Baseball is a very long season, and so you're gonna be dealing with all kinds of aches and pains by the time postseason comes around. And so, having shared my own experience, I had my fair share of bumps and bruises. I stopped catching because I dislocated my thumb too much in college. So then I got out to the outfield and I learned how to play outfield. And then I dealt with a lot of different arm issues. And I know what it feels like to have different ailments that these guys might be going through. So it allows me to kind of gauge, okay, this guy's BSing me. Like he's not actually that hurt. Versus like this is a real situation, And so
Yeah.
if you can just speak to those guys and I think it does help a ton to have that rapport built, having had experience playing baseball, but it
Mhm.
also helps that the coaching staff is also bought into you because I mean, when you get into those sports where it's one strength coach one strength coach has one team, like you're basically another staff member. And so
Yeah.
that is a relationship that's built probably before the interview process, but also it's only built stronger because you're on the same page. Like I'm in on every staff meeting, and so I know what practice is looking like down from the minutia of how many hours we're going to be out there, how many minutes are we spending on defense, how many minutes and how many hours, how much time are we spending on on hitting. What kind of
Mhm.
hitting are we doing today? What kind of base running are we doing today? I base my program and my warm up depending on what we're doing for base running on any particular day, so I can wave those loads and volumes throughout the week. And so
Mhm.
when the players understand that that's what's going on, they're going to run through a wall for you because not only does it show initiative, but it shows that you care about the sport, number one, more than you might think someone else that hadn't played baseball. But number two, it shows that you actually care about the players and care about the team and winning. I think obviously I can't speak for every strength coach out there, but I want all my teams to succeed. I want my baseball players to succeed. I want every single guy, even their starting nine, that have guys that are trying to vie for their spot. I want those backups to succeed, And so um, to a different level, I would imagine, just because again, these guys I see every day, every day. One more point about that is my office these last 3 years has been in the weight room, and our weight
Mhm.
room is connected to a door that leads to our facility or leads to the
Mhm.
parking lot where the guys all park. So essentially, our setup right now is they get into the facility, walk through the weight room, see me every day, and then go into the clubhouse. And so like
Yeah. There's
there's
avoiding your no avoiding your
there's no
face
getting away from me.
there.
Yeah, you can't get away from me.
Yeah.
So like yeah,
Yeah.
I get to know these guys at a pretty deep level, more than maybe another strength coach may be able to do
That
if they had other
that's
sports.
That's super special, I think, and I find some parallels too with my role with, I oversee two teams, one being power snowboard. Yeah, that exactly as you're describing, super similar, like embedded connection with them. Not just on my background, like background having competed in snowboarding and being embedded traveling with them, like on snow and being able to tailor, warm ups or sessions because I've been in your position. I've been sore after riding. I know the difference between SBX versus bank slalom and then the fourth. It kind of makes it fun for me because I feel like, wow, I'm in it still with you guys. Beyond that buy-in, but similarly, like the coaches have encouraged, and I've kind of leaned into it, this extension of being part of their staff. Now, I'm not making decisions at the end of the day, perhaps like you might as director of, baseball performance when it comes to skill worker, you're out there, but I'm out there like still observing everything that's happening. And I can ask those coaches questions and at least kind of maybe nudge them like, hey, have you thought about this? And then for this reason, but I can also continue to learn and grow as kind of a sport coach through them as well. But as you've gone from this year one to where you are now as director of baseball performance, like how has that kind of 3 4 year process looked? Like I'm 2 3, I'm going to my third season, not quite full game cycle, but are you starting to see like, okay, that like my programming from 3 years ago is starting to be realized by like uprising seniors now in a certain way, or that some guys that have been with you from day one on your job, you've kind of seen their progression and evolution in addition to the evolution of your own programming, and evolution as a person. I don't know if you can speak to that or share some insights.
Yeah,
I'd be curious
no
how that
doubt,
looks in the
dude.
collegiate setting there.
So it's funny you mentioned that. College sports are changing ever so often, man. Like day by day, there's something new developing within our sport, within the collegiate realm. And so I am fortunate enough to have a couple of seniors that I started off with as freshmen when I first got here. And then on to my fourth year, we got our summer lifting right now. And I actually got with a kid that extremely talented. He's got all the tools in the world to be a professional. He's a rising senior. Um, he's a switch hitter. It's been great to see as far as his body has changed so much. So when he first got here in August, the same time I got here, August of 2022, he's about 150 pounds. Today, when we ran through a movement screen. So I do a movement screen with all our players, all returners, all new guys. Um, it's a little bit more abbreviated for those returners as far as like what I'm trying to see because they are able to do each screen fairly well at a proficient level. But for this particular athlete, he weighed in at 185. And so that's 30 pounds in 4 years, and I love using that as an example because he's an everyday starter, but also it doesn't happen overnight. Like I don't want kids thinking that they can grow 30 pounds of muscle in a season. Maybe you can if a young kid. But it has shown that he stayed really healthy all throughout his career going into his senior year. And so the workouts, the programming has, in my opinion, and he's proof of the pudding, has been sound for our program thus far, right?
Mhm.
As far as changes that are concerned, there's always going to be a little bit of tweaks of how I want to set up a particular workout or a program or different parameters. I'd say I'm a little more, I give guys a little bit more liberty and freedom by the spring, and I've been doing that a lot more by this last season, and I think I've garnered really good results from that as far as guys staying fresh. And so
Mhm.
versus my first year, I was a little bit more strict with parameters as far as weight on the bar and exercises. This year, during in season, I've allowed guys the freedom to choose different modalities within the same pattern in
Mhm.
season, especially late in season, because I want to make sure that these guys are feeling fresh. I don't want them to think that they got to spit a square peg around a round hole because that's not going to work. And so
Mhm.
I wouldn't say I was like a stickler about it necessarily, like being rude about getting on guys about
Yeah,
wanting to
yeah.
do something else. But I think this year was the year that I was like, okay, the system works. I'm cool with them doing a different variation as needed in the event they got certain aches and pains. I think if there's any difference from year one going into year four, that would be it. But for the most part, the program has stayed relatively the same. You know,
Mhm.
um, I guess to share a little bit more insight on the programming, I like to use a high-low model. as far as like vertical integration, high-low model, Charlie Francis, the vertical integration model I love, just because like I know that I can make those decisions and changes it on the fly if I need to when it comes to game schedules. Maybe it's a double header because Sunday's game got snowed out here in Utah in the beginning of March, right? Like that's a very real thing for us. Like, do I slide up the program a day? Do I take a day off? Are the guys' bodies feeling okay? Type of deal. And so that's what I've used throughout the entirety of my time here at Utah Valley, and it has worked
Mhm.
wonders. But yeah, the differences are
Yeah.
just having a little bit more autonomy this last season.
No, that's awesome. And it sounds like with most coaches, right, you refine your systems and the systems allow you to continue playing the game. But with that, you probably can like trim some of the fat as and create that autonomy for athletes to like, yeah, it still fits the stimulus we're trying to achieve this day. And then I think that speaks to your education as well with the guys that have come up, whether it's 1 year or they just, buy into the culture and are supported by their teammates in addition from you, but the education around like, yeah, we're looking for a unilateral squat pattern here, right? And a certain range of motion. Those are your parameters or constraints. Now, you know, be creative in some sense. um,
Right, right.
I've experienced a similar thing, and one of the biggest challenges I think I've faced with this new adaptive population for me is movement bandwidth. What is acceptable and what's not. I remember walking kind of first day into the weight room, working with one of my athletes that I have a really great relationship now, one of our top alpine skiers, and had him on a belt squat, and he's squatting. And there's so much that I just want to cue up. Like this doesn't look squatty at all, and I realize I'm not going to give a single cue. I am here to learn, and I have to throw everything I think I know about motor control, motor learning. Like I need to like revisit that and kind of recalibrate myself to the individual needs. But then again, how do I take that individual and systematize it so that for my own process and sanity, I can speed up the decision making. That comes with time and experience, of course. Has there been anything similar to that, like with you, where you do have really great understanding of the sport? You talk about kind of the movement screen, which I'm sure is helpful. Poly systems, which you're alluding to, but things you're still exploring, or like things like that that you've experienced, maybe even to this day with baseball sport you're very familiar with,
Yeah. So
where you're
I
kind of
love how you
auditing yourself,
mentioned what's that?
like kind of where you're auditing yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
auditing myself. So when it comes to the program design piece, I don't have huge parameters. I do one thing that I make sure of is that I want to make sure that week one sprint program um is significantly less than what I want to see down the road in like 8 weeks, right? Just to see where that's at for week one. Because week two, depending on how the guys are coming in on week two, they're going to either increase the volume in the sprint program, or it might stay the same, or it might decrease. If it's a decrease, that means I overshot what I thought they could be capable of. And
Mhm.
so the yardages are something that I'll keep in mind. Those yardages, I don't say they're arbitrary, but I think it's something that I feel like those guys should be able to handle by the time they get to fall. And so that is what will increase incrementally from week to week when it comes to the sprint program.
Mhm.
As far as auditing myself, I don't have necessarily parameters outside of like knowing what they should be at by the end of the
Yeah.
summer before we get into fall camp, right?
Mhm.
And then one thing too is um, I want to make sure that guys are able to protract and retract their scapula. I think that's huge for the arm care and shoulder care of our athletes. And so what I'll make sure we do is work on a ton of rotator cuff, but not like the piddly like ER, IR type deal. I always add in at least one variation in modality of rotator cuff care. Isometric, eccentric, and high repetition. They're going to hit one of those three every session for their
Mhm.
shoulder care. That's pitchers and position players alike, across the board. There's going to be some theme of that in their program. One of those three every day in their program, every day.
Sweet.
And so, as far as auditing myself, if I ever like start programming and I want to be like mad creative, I always look at, okay, push pull ratio. I know that they should have a little bit more pull than push. Um, I think that's just a safer bet. I don't necessarily think 2 to 1 is the answer. I think that's a little
Mhm.
overkill, to be honest. There are, in fact,
Yeah.
some people that need to do a lot more reaching than they need to do more retracting, which is actually very common when I've seen with our guys. A lot of people sit with military posture. A lot of people try to think big, talk big, walk big. And so like that's what I'll audit with what I see in the screen. But as far as arm care, shoulder care, I'll have my spreadsheet out and it'll show me what exercises we're doing as far as a push, a squat, a pull, an overhead pull, things like that. As far as reps are concerned, I'll cross reference the volume against each other and just see where I'm at. And then in season, I'll have that as well. It's obviously going to be a little bit less volume. And then when the off season hits, that's when I try not to go crazy. Like, okay, this is what they did in the fall.
Hmm.
I know they should be doing a shit ton more in the off season. Well, what's that going to look like week one? Because it's not going to be two times as much volume, right? So
Yeah.
like that's how I'll audit it as far as like having the repetitions accounted for.
Hmm.
But when it comes to my progression as a coach going on the floor, especially when you alluded to skill acquisition, which I took a really fun course in 2021 from Prescript from Killian Hamilton's acquisition.
Hmm.
And so he went over the Fitz-Posner model of cognitive, associative, and autonomous phases of skill acquisition. And
Hmm.
so I've actually used a few of those thoughts and systems to how I like to program for our guys. So like if it's a heavier press type of day, high skill with a bench press or a dumbbell press, right? It requires a lot of skill. What can I use that's just similar to a press motion that isn't as skillful that they can achieve a lot of reps on so that the limiting factor isn't the skill of it, it's the muscle that I'm trying to work on. And so like the
Hmm.
bench press early on in the program is something that we'll use as a high skill, high threshold force exercise. Then I'll go into a weighted push up by the end of the workout, and that'll be max reps
Hmm.
as an example. Right. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's an easy, I mean, it's a press. They should know how to push up if I'm teaching them the bench press, right? At least I hope so. By that point, when we get to the workout, and then it's an easier exercise to see how much progress they can get week to week, because that's one thing that we'll see progress on week to week. It's not always going to be the skill exercise. It'll be the autonomous regress version, if you will, at the end of
Hmm.
their workout. That could be for squat too. If you have a leg press, awesome. If you have a hack squat, awesome. You could even do like a wall sit, if you will. There are a lot of different ways. You can audit your program that way as well. Like,
Yeah.
are they getting better? Pick an exercise that's less skill intensive and then see if they've gotten better on that while they're still working on the skill and refining their technique on that higher skill threshold exercise, like a squat or a bench press.
Yeah. That's awesome. I am curious too, just as we're talking like programming, somewhat auditing and all this stuff, like you oversee a lot. And I think that's awesome. Like you have wear a lot of different hats, if you will, depending on whether you're at the baseball field, you're in the weight room in your domain, etc. What does the like collaboration then look like at the NCAA level with those sport coaches, with like sports medicine ATs? Like, is there turnover there? Has it been consistent? And if so, are there things that like do you still have the autonomy yourself to program, right? Or they kind of you have an AT or PT working with you saying, no, this is what we need. I'm not entirely sure what that looks like. Maybe you could kind of like illustrate that if it's evolved to maybe you've got some more free reign. I don't know. But
Yeah, dude, Brian, that's a really good question, man. There's a lot to unpack with that question because I will tell you this. Um, Again, going into year four, this last season we had a new coach. So the original guy, he got a job as the head guy at the University of Washington. So our associate head coach these last 3 seasons, he stepped in as the head coach this year. And so the system had been it's a lot different when it comes to the collaboration piece with practice planning and especially with the swing because our head coach he takes care of our hitters. And so, as far as collaboration from sport coaches, not only with the hitting coach, but the pitching coach and the fielding coach, we'll all collaborate with one another, and especially from each domain to myself and the AT. Um, Brian, I'll tell you this, man. I don't think I could have gotten in a better situation as far as my ability to do what I need to do for our team without any sort of constraints outside of 20-hour weeks and 8-hour weeks. Right.
Mhm.
And so it's been amazing. It's been amazing. The collaboration, it goes like this. I alluded to the movement screen, and that is something that they do at the big league level. Organizations, all organizations um, are going to go through some sort of movement screen with their players. And so that is something that I learned at an internship because I've done a lot of them like yourself, a lot of them. Um, and I learned that over at Put Performance in 2020 during COVID before I went and did my grad school, which is another story. Because I was able to play while being a strength coach. That's a whole other story. We can talk about that later. But
Yeah.
so I learned that system. What the movement screen does, it's not pass or fail. It basically tells us what kind of movement these athletes, each individual athlete is capable of. And I relay that to the sport coaches, the pitching coach and the hitting coach, and they make the initiatives for their skill work and their initiatives to make those players better based off of parts of our screen. It is a jumping off point. Obviously, there are going to be some outliers as far as capabilities are concerned with different movement screen results, but it is a very collaborative process because the pitching coach and I will meet every other week, and the hitting coach, the head coach, and I will meet every other week as far as what the initiatives they're doing are garnering any sort of results, and what is the mobility corrective exercise doing to their initiative as well. Is it helping? Is it not? Do we need to go a different direction with this athlete? And that a lot of it has to do with the stance, and a lot of it has to do with their ability to deliver the barrel. And so that's what the sport coaches are going to do. They have the jumping off point from the screen and they make those initiatives. Because again, as I alluded to, 20-hour weeks, 8-hour weeks, not a whole lot of time with the players, man. So they have to be precise with their initiatives because they can't just start throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. Like, pardon my
Mhm.
French, but it streamlines the process of getting our players better. And when it comes to the return to play protocols, um, our athletic trainer, he's awesome. He allows me to be as aggressive as I need to be. But anytime I get a guy coming off of an injury or a shutdown period, um, one of my biggest, I guess, what you can call a philosophy is graded exposure. Graded exposure. And that could be from the modality standpoint, that can be from the intensity standpoint or a volume standpoint, but it's always a graded exposure because that allows the guys to feel more involved. Like, I'm not going to let a kid be told, like, hey, you need to be able to hold a wall sit for a minute before you can do any sort of split squatting. Like, no, dude. You tell me if this bugs it, barring anything told to you by a doctor. But we're gonna split squat, and if you can split squat with body weight, great. Let's put on a goblet. If you can do goblet for a lot of repetitions, great. So just graded exposures all the way up until they can get to this guy with safety bar for our guys.
Mhm.
So there was a lot to unpack there, but the process it's very holistic here at Utah Valley. It is very holistic here. There's no silos. We're all collaborating on what's going on. And again, I provide a jumping off point with it when it comes to that movement screen.
No, that's rad. No, thanks for kind of illustrating what that looks like too. Um, I do want to pivot to hearing about kind of your grad experience, but the last thing I kind of want to mention, like about UVU, and feel free to, you know, take this where you'd like. Um, I've gone through some of your Instagram reels. I've seen that over some time, and I feel like I want to be embedded in one of your sessions. Like they look really engaging, both some of the field work I see you do in the off season and season, as well as the lifts. Like there's just some straightforward, like kind of meat heady stuff that like I'm like, man, this looks sick, and like developing some really sick like outputs, as well as you implement some kind of like water bags as well. Like there's some movement variability where I'm like, yeah, if I'm an athlete, like that's engaging. Like there's a little bit of a problem solving task in there. You have a quote kind of in your Instagram that's like separation. Um, it's about the separation or for preparation,
Yeah.
or correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if that's your slogan or
Yeah,
UVU.
it's
Maybe
separation is in the preparation.
separation is in the preparation. There it is. Maybe you could unpack that a little bit. And I don't know if that in you unpacking that you can also kind of describe, because we've gone over it, kind of your role, mentioned it, but I don't think we've touched on some of the success you've had at UVU since being there. So if you could kind of toot your own horn a little bit as you talk about that, unpack that quote, that would be awesome.
Yeah, dude. So separation is in the preparation. You know, a confident man is a prepared man, and I like having that quote up in our weight room. It's actually right there in between our display boards. And, um, dude, I know personally, I've gone through a lot of different experiences in life and in college as a guy that's learned a different, system, a lot of different, uh, perspectives from various destinations, like being able to work with big leaguers at Push Performance, being able to work with a basketball team, a sport that I know very little about, but have turned my perspective around as far as how to engage with athletes, working with Steve Englehart, right? Just how he interacts with his players has really changed how I like to interact with our guys. And I took that into my first year being here at Utah Valley. And so just knowing that I've done the work and am continuing to do the work has helped me be prepared and thus being confident and helping our guys know that they are prepared going into a game. I love having that quote up on the board because when they walk by that board and walk into the weight room, they look at that and like, oh, that's the reminder. Like, hey, if I'm not prepared, like I'm not going to have any sort of separation from my peers or from the competition. And I think that's been a culmination of all these years of knowing that their bodies are feeling good. They're seeing results, seeing their bodies change. They're seeing the fastball velocity tick up before they even had practice in their eval pen from working out in the summertime. Like they understand that the work has to be done, but if I do the work, like there's going to be some separation involved for me getting from a back end up 10, down 10 reliever to a setup man or a closer or hell, getting a starting job on the mound one of 3 days in a conference weekend, right? And so a lot of that. I mean, I've also had a chip on my shoulder. I've been told that I run with my piss hot. Um, and so that started ever since high school. Just trying to out prepare other people. Um, and obviously, like there's not a competition of strength coach versus strength coach. Like my job is not won or determined success because I was able to implement this program. It was, having to integrate myself with the players, gain the buy-in from the staff and the administration to be able to get this program where we're at. And again, at the end of the day, I'm a support staff member. I do my due diligence to make sure that these guys are in the right spots, that this program is going the right direction, but it isn't all up to me. I get this, I get the roster, I get the players, I do what I can to make those players better, make them feel really good about their performance and the results and their progress, and then let that confidence breed out there in the field, right? And that's all it is, man. And I love having that quote out. I love having that quote out because that's what I had to do as an athlete. I'm 5'5" with 8 hours of sleep, hanging upside down like Batman. Like you gotta prepare. You gotta prepare to be physically ready, mentally ready, and emotionally ready to tackle whatever the task is. And now that my playing career is done, like I want to live sure vicariously through our guys, but I want them to know that they got a guy in their corner. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. And I think that's what these guys are understanding when they go through the doors and get into this session with me is that they know that I give a shit. I give a lot. And so that's the biggest thing. That's what that quote essentially means.
Yeah, well, you're definitely creating a culture there that I think is amplifying, and I think that shows across the collaborative effort, right, across the program. Um, but yeah, I commend you on that. Not to pivot, I definitely want you to speak freely if there's more you want to add to UVU. But so you played baseball while being basically going through your master's as a GA, and remind that was at Dubuque.
Yep. The
So
University of Dubuque.
So that's, I imagine, fun, but also a lot of hard work to still play at a high level and do your masters and still kind of be in the weight room coaching to some extent, probably managing a couple teams. Could you speak to that? Like, you're
Yeah.
obviously a workhorse. So,
Yeah, it was yeah, that was that was a hard ass year, man. Because here's the thing. Give you some context. So 2020 COVID, That was my 5th year of baseball. 5th year.
Mhm.
I was
And where were you playing at the
devastated.
time with that? That was in Washington still?
No, that was at the University of
Or
Dubuque.
okay, so you did your undergrad there too?
Yeah, I did my undergrad and my
Okay,
grad over there at the University of Dubuque. Did some
gotcha.
JUCO in 2017, 2018, and then 2018 fall I got into the University of Dubuque. It's a Division III school out in Dubuque, Iowa. If you've never been to Dubuque, Brian, I highly recommend going because it is a beautiful gem in the Midwest. It's right there on the Mississippi River.
I grew
Beautiful.
up I grew up and went to high school kind of Milwaukee area, and so I've spent some time. Anytime I drove west, you could go the pretty route, which would often take you through Dubuque instead of dropping right down to 80. So I
Sure,
do know it.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
No, awesome. That's great. That's great. You should, yeah, it's awesome there, especially in the summertime.
Mhm.
Muggy as heck, but it's beautiful. But anyway, yeah, Dubuque was out there. 5th year of baseball was 2020. I was really excited. In fact, I was a single shy of the cycle against a ranked Division II team in Ashland, over in Florida, until they canned our season during COVID, which sucked. And so I was kind of caught in limbo. I didn't know, no one knew what was going on. No one knew what that entailed, not to bring back COVID, but there was a lot of opportunities that sprouted along with people's careers, mine included. I got an internship at Push Performance, worked with some big leaguers. They actually hired me on as a remote coach, since I did accept my GA job. And then I found out that I got my year of eligibility back. And my strength coach, who I had a really great relationship with, had said, "Hey, I would love to have you as my graduate assistant strength coach, and you can play your last year of baseball. You just got to make sure that you're training a bunch of these teams." Like, sweet. So basically, Brian, I was training like I was still a regular baseball player, while also getting up at 5 a.m. every day to train the football team, the volleyball team, the soccer team, the softball team, and training my own team, my teammates. That was my main responsibility, was baseball and golf,
Wow.
but I was assisting all these other sports. And so you can imagine the amount of sleep I wasn't getting. And, I think that reared its ugly head at me by the time we got to spring, because 2021 spring was my 6th year of baseball. And I can remember it to the day. We were playing Centenary over in Shreveport, Louisiana. And I'm taking fly balls in right field. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take one more fly ball. I sprint in, taking uh, like a little bleeder right in front of me, and pull my hamstring,
Mhm.
out for 6 weeks. And I think I can attribute that to a lack of recovery, because I was just spreading myself too thin. But
Mhm.
the nice thing was, being able to coach my teammates. They were really supportive of me. And that dynamic was, hey, I'm a player when I'm on the field. When I'm in the weight room with you guys, you got to understand that this is a different beast. All right. This is a different dynamic. This has to be it. And they took that challenge, and I took that challenge on, with a head full of steam. I was excited to do it because I had a really good relationship, close with all those teammates. But they understood that that's what I wanted to do, and they were awesome. They were awesome. They
Mhm.
they did a great job of adhering to the program and not giving me a hard time, being their teammate as well. And
Yeah.
so the tough part too here, Brian, is I didn't end up playing a whole lot that year as a 6-year senior, because I was inconsistent getting into the game with my hamstring. After a 6-week off stint, I came back, re-injured it, was out for 2 weeks additionally, and then I just didn't see the field very much often. We got later in that season in 2021. So it was what it was. I think it was a blessing in disguise, just nudging me to be like, hey, dude, like, you should be a strength coach now. Like, you should just kind of be done. And so, but yeah, I offer that story up too, because it was also give me the perspective of understanding what our guys do right now here at Utah
Mhm.
Valley, as far as like understanding recovery. And I don't get too much into the weeds with recovery, like with biohacking your body, but as that's a very big buzzword. But I have my own pseudo AMS. Every
Mhm.
day our guys walk into the weight room, they'll body weight, they'll check in with their body weight, amount of hours of sleep, stress at a 1 to 10 scale, and soreness on a 1 to 10 scale. It's on the iPad. They'll log that in every day they walk in, and then it allows me to kind of have a better idea of what they're doing outside of
Hmm.
here. And the buy-in is huge there because they could just lie about it, but they know I'm not going to berate them. I'm going to have a conversation, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was my time at Dubuque. And then the year after 2022, my last year getting my master's as a GA, I worked a lot of jobs. I had
Hmm.
like the coaching staff at Dubuque had asked me to be a volunteer coach, so I coached first base on game days. Still coached the baseball team in the weight room. Um, I was personal training at a local gym in Dubuque, and then I was waiting tables at a local bar restaurant as well. So I was doing a lot of different things during my last year. I
Yeah.
kept pretty busy. So there was no shortage of work, man. There was no shortage of work that I did, whether that be entrenched in the actual industry itself or just trying to support myself. But like, you got to do what you got to do, especially if you're trying to get back into college. There's a lot of things you got to do that, especially in strength and conditioning, that might be pretty gritty, to say the
Yeah. No,
least.
I appreciate you sharing that because I mean, what it kind of sounds like passion and a level of drivenness kind of helped you kind of stay on top of all that. Like, not to say you want to go back to that, but yeah, those experiences, as tough as they were, have helped shape you. Are there other like mentors though, or like leadership like outside of sport? Like it sounds like you had a great strength coach like during your GA. You know, we had some crossover at CU Boulder, some great mentors there. You mentioned prescript. Like, are there other like leaders, even if it's like your parents, that like have maybe shaped some of the qualities you seem to demonstrate? Because like you're well, you articulate yourself well. You carry yourself really well. Like when I worked with you in person and got to see you like kind of execute on your craft, like you're energetic, like you're very authentic. And not to say that's, you know, rare, but it is. It's special, and you kind of embody that. I'd be curious though, like what other experiences you can attribute that to?
Yeah, no doubt. That's an awesome question, man. I do want to plug my parents here a little bit. You know, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing here at Utah Valley or going to other internships if it wasn't for my folks. And my folks, they work their butts off too, man. Share a little bit of my background. I'm full 100% Filipino. I'm a first generation Filipino American. My parents came here in the 90s and then they had me. And so getting here in the 90s for my parents being immigrants, they left a lot of things on the table back in the Philippines. My mom, she had a master's in economics, I want to say, at a university in the Philippines. And she said, you know what? I'm gonna go to America. First job she ever get, man. Taco Bell. Taco Bell. Nothing wrong with Taco Bell, but she had a master's degree from the Philippines and she came here to America and the first thing she had to do was Taco Bell. And again, nothing wrong with that, but like it's humbling. It's tough to do. Um, my dad, he was a line cook on a merchant ship and then ended up immigrating here and entrenched himself in the American culture. And he had $200 and a wad of clothes and a bicycle when he got here, when he first touched down on the American soil. And so I look at them and I use them as an example of like, you can't be comfortable. You can't be comfortable. They left comfort. They left comfort to come here. And so, like, anytime I get, whether that be nervous about speaking in front of people or any sort of the matter like that, I always look to what that experience was for them. And I try to
Hmm.
understand, like, hey, man, like, I got a roof over my head. I got a cool job. Like, there's nothing really I can complain about, right? And so if I do end up kind of having that little bitchy voice in my head telling me things that are hard, it's like, dude, what did they do? You know,
Hmm.
they didn't work their butt off for you to have those kinds of complaints, you know? And so everyone's human. You're sometimes they get the best of you having those kinds of thoughts, but um like that's what I turn to. That's what's kind of given me that edge and passion for what I like. You know, I first stepped into a weight room when I was a freshman in high school, a rising freshman in high school. Again, I was a small dude, still am a small dude. But like, if you're trying to play with a football team, like you gotta kind of work hard to join that kind of a squad. And so like high school sports really help shape that like determination of trying to be better. But when it comes to adversity, like I always think about how my parents were raised. Dude. I mean, Now my mom, she's retired, which is great, but she was able to retire on her own terms because she has her own business that's making uh money on the side without her having to work. She's an adult family home care provider. And so like that's a hard business, man. Like you got it, there's a lot of liability involved. There's a lot of customer service involved with those clients. And I actually lived with our residents when my mom first started that business. So I was able to see her work firsthand. And then along with my dad, he got here with those $200 in a wad of clothes, got a job at Boeing, started off as a custodian, and then worked his way into becoming a painter. He painted planes for 30 years for Boeing. And so like those kinds of stories are what I love hearing and I would love gleaning on when it comes to me like, shoot, maybe I should take a break today or not do this, not get this done for our guys today. Like, no, that's I think to those things because like at some point I'm gonna have to be supporting other people too, which is gonna get pretty serious here soon with my girlfriend, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I lean on them. Those would be my mentors, among others, but like the main ones are probably my parents.
Yeah. No, we are all human and we do slip up, but like I forget if it's Kobe or someone's like, don't talk about it, just be about it. Just embody the thing. Like it's a state of being, right? And more times than not, if you live a certain way, it's impactful when you come across those special people that like yourself, just they are a role model because it's like they do what they say they're gonna do. They live the way they say they live. And it's you don't have to question that. It's just kind of like JJ's there for us, and I imagine that's the impact and influence in some extent. I'm kind of generalizing here of the people around you that they probably feel, but that's your partner, whether that's the athletes you work with, the staff you work alongside. So that's awesome. As
Yeah.
far as stuff like that you're interested in, like wormholes, whether that's continuing education or stuff that you're even just trialing, if you're allowed to speak about it, I'd be
Yeah.
curious to like see where your head's at. Like, what's next for you as far as whether it's that learning or testing or trialing things, like just to push yourself, particularly within this craft. It could go a lot of ways, whether that's at UVU, whether it's kind of private stuff you're teasing out. But yeah, be interested in that.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things in my mind, man. One thing's for sure that's a little bit more fresh is I want to start here in August. I want to purchase my business license and get my own private training going on, kind of on a bigger scale. I have a couple people on my roster currently. It's just tough with the college, just being associated with Utah Valley, only because I can't work with a large amount of people when it comes to population. It's middle school or below, or like adults, because I can't work with college athletes that are not Utah Valley. I can't work with high school kids because that's considered recruiting. And so that's where it kind of gets tough. There are a couple of guys that are professional athletes that have left our program and are going to matriculate into independent ball. So that's one project I'm working on right now, is to try to get that off the ground a little bit. I've got a name for it. I don't know if it's copyrighted yet, but I'm looking at using the name, the title, Element Human Performance, just because I think it embodies all kinds of aspects to physical training, not only physical but like the skill piece to it as well. But that's the name that I'm looking at right now. Hopefully, no one takes it or it's not already taken as it is. I think it's a sweet freaking name. The other thing that I'm working on this last off season, actually, I do need to crunch the numbers on it, but I think it worked well as far as individualizing programming.
Mhm.
Because baseball players, it's not like football in the sense of like you have your bigs, you have your semis, and you have your skills, right? And you can program accordingly to what their position group is. Baseball is super different that you'll get two guys that play the same position look completely different. You could have a 6'5" shortstop and a 5'5" shortstop. You're not going to train shortstops, those two shortstops, the same necessarily, right? And so I've made my own pseudo quadrant system,
Mhm.
not to be confused with Daniel Bove and his quadrant system book. I used a little bit of like how he organized his training as far as the quadrant system is concerned. I don't want to misspeak. I believe that was Daniel Bove.
Mhm.
I could be wrong, but he's the strength coach for the Pelicans. and it's a lot more basketball-esque when he had presented that book. But
Yep.
the quadrant system, basically, we had one of our professional athletes, our draft guys from 2023 spring, Casey Anderson, 11th round draft pick for the Diamondbacks, right-handed pitcher. He's a stud. He's playing for the Hillsborough Hops right now, in high A ball. But he had come in for an offseason. He explained to me what they do organizationally as for the Diamondbacks. I don't know if this is something that I can necessarily share, but I won't go into too many specifics. But basically, they had bucketed athletes organization wide and had made programs that pertain to increasing certain skills and tools for each player, depending on what bucket they were in. And so I thought that was really cool. And that's something that I tried to do this year. And it's been extremely engaging and easy to implement in the setting that I have. I'm
Mhm.
not currently in our weight room right now because, again, like I told you, it's almost a common space right now where my office is. So I would show you. It's 3 squat racks. We have dumbbells. We actually just made a huge improvement to our weight room, which is awesome. But what I've been working with these last 3.5 years, going into year 4, is 3 squat racks, barbells, safety bars. We have no cable machines. We have no cable
Mhm.
machines. And so now we have cable machines, and which has been great. But like I can start to tailor their program based on what they need. So to sum it up, I have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, 3, and 4. Quadrant 1s are going to be guys that are really explosive and strong. Quadrant 4, those are guys that are strong but not very explosive. Quadrant 3 is not explosive or strong. And then quadrant 2 are going to be the guys that are explosive but not very strong. And so with those, I can curtail the program to maybe more extensive plyometrics for those that are not very explosive. I can have more high repetition exercises for those that aren't very strong or muscular yet. And then for those
Mhm.
guys that are already pretty strong and explosive, we're going to double down on explosiveness because working on strength, we're always going to have levels of strength worked on throughout the entire year. But I'm not trying to take a 560-pound trap bar deadlift for 5 reps to a 570-pound trap bar deadlift for 5 reps. Like that's going to take too
Yeah.
long, right? And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
to what end is that going to improve their exit velocity or their sprint speed or their fastball velocity? I can't say that that's going to really improve much, but I can make them more explosive. And so,
Mhm.
like, those are the things that I've been working on as far as projects are concerned. I do believe that it was extremely engaging for our guys. They loved it. You know, they also like talking crap to each other about, "Hey, you're a quadrant 3, don't talk to me," type deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so it's
Yeah, a
been
little bit of
great.
competitiveness. Yeah, I'm sure.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. So, like, as far as projects are concerned and continuing education, like one book that I've been reading as of late is Agile Periodization by Mladen Jovanovic. That's something
Mhm.
that I've dove into a little bit. The strength training manual.
Yep.
I think he's coming out with a new one. I can't remember.
There,
It's a huge
there's a
book.
volume 2 out already.
Oh, sure, sure, sure. I
Yeah.
think that's the one I actually have right now. But I thought that was incredibly brilliant to read just because of like it kind of morphs into the high-low model, but it also shows you that like no model is perfect, which has been like thank God, because it's like
Mhm.
when you're a young strength coach, you're like, okay, what's the perfect model? What's the sets and reps here? What do I need to do for the guys during this part of the year? And so it's been good to just have that guiding light, just knowing like, hey, nothing's gonna be perfect, but if they can adhere to it, great.
Mhm.
As long as it's getting them better, great. Does it work with your own unique situation? Great. Because again, 3 squat racks, you're not training 40 guys. I'm not even training 20 guys. So my days are pretty long with sessions of 10 guys. But like again, everyone's got their unique situation. But yeah, as far as just to
Yeah.
wrap it up, man, like yeah, those are the kind of things that I'm working on as of late.
Oh, that's cool. I love Latin stuff. Definitely a big influence and readings for me. Some of his takeaways that I've really embraced is, heuristics over sort of like deterministic planning and like robust over optimal, is if you want to take some bigger picture ideas for the listener if they haven't, read or are familiar with Mladen's work. Just to quickly go back to your quadrants, because I do think this is interesting. Have you or even in the future, like I'd be interested to see if you overlay positions then to that, right? Like, because you might find like a certain player is in, the explosive but not strong. And it's kind of like, well, what does that strength then afford them? And obviously you
Sure.
don't know until they possibly increase it. But you might find like, oh man, like, and sorry, I don't know enough about baseball, but like our pitchers, right, might be in that case. And you could make the argument like from a physical quality, like, well, by raising your maximum strength, right, explosiveness and rate of force development might increase even if the explosive side is the priority. So there's still a reason to train strength. Yes, of course, that makes logical sense, or you could create rationale behind that. But I'd be curious as to how that looks, and maybe you've done that to some extent already, or even kind of just seen that anecdotally without data. But I think that would be
Yeah,
interesting.
no. Yeah, no, definitely. That's super interesting. One thing that's for sure is that some of those guys that are really, really strong but not super explosive, yes, I want to increase their explosive capacity. Um, but they're probably not going to move positions. For certain guys. Like if they're a first baseman or a DH, like they're not probably going to turn into a shortstop, right? And so like yeah, to overlay positions, I think that's something that I could look into, you know,
Hmm.
because there are always going to be outliers. The skill of the sport is king. You know,
Hmm.
they can be in quadrant three and be not very strong in the weight room
Hmm.
or explosive in the weight room, but they can still swipe 20 bags. You know, they
Yeah.
can still steal a bunch of bags, or they're still impacting the baseball. So no matter how fast they are, they can still get to second base because they hit the ball far enough, right? Despite having strength deficits or speed deficits. And so that's really curious. But I think a lot of that has to be in the realm of anecdotal, in the sense of, hey man, we had a guy that was a quadrant three borderline. He was a quadrant two, but borderline quadrant three,
Hmm.
and he started every game for us. He hit almost 80 RBIs. He had 17 home runs. And like, despite having those strength deficits and speed deficits, I think he still swiped like 11 bags and hit 17 home runs. Like, shoot, that's an outlier right there as far as athletic specimen versus skill, right? And so the
Yeah.
skill is always going to be the king. You know, like you'll see that a lot in baseball for sure. I don't want guys being like weight room heroes alone. I want them to be very good at their sport, which
Hmm.
is why we do what we do with the screen. Is where the checks at, our initiatives, really doing what they need to be doing for that particular athlete. Because the cool thing about a guy like that is like they have a lot more to get better at physically, which is great. Their ceiling is still having to be met, but they're already really good at their skill. And so like how much more is that going to help? Who knows? But we have more room to grow. But that'd be something to look into as far as overlaying position. I know with our infield coach, we determine, you know, like corner or middles to some extent as far as like how well they can move laterally versus front back, linear front back. And so like that can maybe determine, hey, I think this guy's going to be really good at third base versus at shortstop. Like those are conversations that we have.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not the one making the decisions. Those are things that they'll inquire from me as far as what they look like on the field with our skill work as a general physical prep. Because again, everything in the weight room is general. But like, how can I insert myself in certain scenarios and decision making? You know, and it's nice for me to be able to be part of those conversations. But at the end of the day,
Hmm.
I'm not making those decisions. So but yeah, that's curious. That's curious about overlaying depending on what quadrant they're in. That's a really good question. Yeah, that's curious.
Yeah. Yeah. At the very least, it might be descriptive, even if it's not informative, right? And you could have it note like, okay, I see what, my different player positions look like. And you can also elect to not do anything with it, right? If it's actually not useful, right? It's like, well, we'll still stay course with just prioritizing the quadrants. But really cool stuff, JJ. I appreciate you taking the time. I don't know if you want to share your handle, or otherwise we can drop it in kind of the description with the video below.
Yeah.
But if people want to get in touch with you, is there a best way? Or you're like, no, don't reach out.
No, you can reach out. So my Instagram is J with the juice. I don't remember if it's WITHE and then THE but I guess Brian, you can put that in the
Yeah,
description if
I'll
you
put it in.
like. But yeah, it's J with the juice, three as the E on the end of juice. Um, that was a handle I made way back during COVID in 2020. That's when I first started my Instagram. So, but yeah, you can reach out to me on that. I think I do a good job of trying to reach back out to people that do want to shoot me a DM. But like, yeah, that's probably the best way to contact me if you're not using email anyway. which not many people do, but yeah.
Yeah, this was a really, really great conversation. Thanks, JJ.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Brian. It was awesome to catch up, dude. We gotta do this again soon. We can talk more about skill acquisition